Food is supposed to make us healthy, remain free of chronic diseases.
Food is supposed to support your health and life.
Food is supposed to give us the building blocks needed to build and repair the human body and the energy needed to do those processes. The reality today is that food is mostly harming us.
90% of the footprint of a supermarket is filled with what Michael Pollan once called food-like substances. They're not food.
No matter what chronic disease you look at, we've seen them rise from being very uncommon or extremely rare even or unknown to the most common diseases that even children are aware of.
We have food guidelines from the United States government. We have all of these things telling us how to eat, how to live our lives, how to exercise, and our health has done nothing but get worse.
So our public health system really is a disaster. They've done things like vilify saturated fat, vilify cholesterol, and confuse the whole subject.
We now live with so much sickness all around us that we can't even imagine what it feels like to live in a healthy society.
Over a 20-year span, no increase in calories, moderate increase in exercise, and yet obesity rates went from 30% to 42%. That should sound the alarm bells for us. We're doing something wrong.
So there has to be something else in the environment.
What we're being told to eat is at the heart of our problem.
From the research that I've done over the last 12 years particularly, the evidence leads me to believe that the seed oils, the highly polyunsaturated vegetable oils, are driving probably 90% of obesity and chronic disease across the board. Seed oils are the oils derived almost exclusively from seeds that mostly would have been waste products and or beans, in this case soybeans. So I've broken them down into the seed oils, and that would be oils like soybean, corn, canola, cottonseed, rapeseed, grapeseed, sunflower, safflower, rice bran, sesame, and peanut oils.
100 years ago, there was almost no chronic disease. Physicians knew what these diseases were and had written about them, and there were textbooks on them, but they were not observing them. There was virtually no obesity. Obesity was almost non-existent. There was almost zero diabetes. Now these are all at epidemic proportions in America.
And between 1865, when our consumption was zero in the United States, and it was less than 0.1 grams of vegetable oils per person per day in 1865, grew all the way to 65 grams per person per day by 2014 globally.
The average American consumes 3 to 5 tablespoons of seed oils per day, and it's in almost all ultra-processed foods. Salad dressings, it's in cookies, it's in cakes, it's in crackers, it's in breads, it's in plant milks. To consume the equivalent of 3 to 5 tablespoons of corn oil, we would have to eat 60 to 70 ears of corn. To consume the equivalent of 3 to 5 tablespoons of soybean oil, we're looking at more than 2 pounds of soybeans. Amounts that we would never, ever have encountered historically as humans. So what we have here is a very striking discordance between what we have done for hundreds of thousands of years and what we're eating today in our diets. Incredibly evolutionarily inconsistent consumption of seed oils, which are just easy to consume today.
They're being recommended by our public health authorities in ever increasing amounts. This is a huge increase in a novel food item made out of a factory that never existed before.
And with that has come this explosion of overweight, obesity, and chronic disease. That makes seed oil consumption the single greatest change to the diet of mankind in all of history.
To understand seed oils, you have to understand they're all what's called omega-6 polyunsaturated oils.
These seed oil components, the omega-6 linoleic acid, accumulates in our bodies. It accumulates in our fat, it accumulates in our cell membranes, and this sets up this environment that is pro-oxidative, pro-inflammatory, toxic, and nutrient deficient.
When you eat these oils and these oxidized oils, they enter into your body, they're absorbed into your blood, they actually pass through the blood-brain barrier, and they drive inflammation in your body. Inflammation is known to drive heart disease. Inflammation is known to drive stress all over the body. It's known to cause cell death.
Something about these ultra-processed foods seems to be almost poisoning our metabolism, leading to more of this caloric energy being stored. To me, this looks like evidence that we are being poisoned.
Many people know that arsenic, for example, is a very damaging molecule. It's very dangerous poison, and it's dangerous because it's a pro-oxidant. And if the dose is high enough, it'll kill you very fast. But if the dose is really low, then it behaves just like vegetable oils. They're both pro-oxidative. So arsenic kills us through oxidation. Vegetable oils ultimately maim and kill us mostly through oxidation.
Bethany Hamilton's just hammering away, really gaining momentum down the line. A bigger snap to finish off. This way keeps on.
And the wild card, Bethany Hamilton, is going to take the win. It's definitely one of the best surfers in the world.
I had such an amazing childhood growing up, but I would say like our diet was pretty standard American diet. Life was busy, and so meals weren't always prioritized. And so over time, it was interesting to just see how that affected me through my young adult life. I was like pursuing professional surfing, and so I looked into diet and I looked into movement, all these different things that could encourage me to have my most success. I would exercise like 6-7 hours a day sometimes, like fairly regularly. But even then, it felt kind of hard for me to manage my weight. And I also, there was just some things that were off. I wanted to be healthy, I wanted to be thriving. And that's when it became my own, and I started to heal myself. When I became aware of seed oils in particular, it wasn't as early as I wished. It was after I had my second son when I started making even more shifts towards eating just super clean and healthy, removing the seed oils. My third pregnancy was really good, but my fourth was my best, and I was just in awe of my body and how it was reacting to eating more mineral-dense, healthy, nutritious foods, more protein. I felt that shift really kick in, and it doesn't have to be this super high-achieving thing. I think there's ways to do it more affordably and do it more simply, and you find your rhythm and your routine with life in a healthy fashion.
Seed oils are absolutely not natural. They're not a food of nature. Seed oils are the single most processed food on the planet, bar none.
Seeds, nuts, beans can only be made into an oil in a factory. It needs to go through so many industrial steps in order to create the oil.
The actual process of making these oils heats them to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. And then they must be deodorized at the end of that, because the process of heating the oils to 500 degrees inevitably causes them to become rancid, oxidized, or rusted in the colloquial sense.
So no one would eat seed oils. They would run from them if they smelled them before the deodorization process.
Cottonseed oil had originally been used as a lubricant for machinery in the Industrial Revolution. After we had hunted all the whales out of the ocean, we hunted the whales mainly for their fat. When we lost that source of fat, it had to be replaced. Cottonseed oil came in to fill that need for all kinds of machinery, for making candles and soaps, and that was it. Then Procter & Gamble came along and said, let's try to sell this as a foodstuff. So in 1911, they sold it as an ersatz, a fake lard, and they called it Crisco. Crisco was the first time anywhere in the history of the world that vegetable oils were marketed as a food item to be consumed by humans.
Butter and lard and even tallow began to be replaced and supplanted. And this is what took off in the 20th century.
The story of Crisco that was published in 1913, so 2 years after Crisco was launched, and it says, and so the nation's cookbook has been hauled out and is being revised. Upon thousands of pages, the word lard and butter have been crossed out and the word Crisco written in their place. It was the earnest aim of the makers of Crisco to produce a strictly vegetable product without adding a hard and consequently indigestible animal fat. So pretending that animal fats are indigestible even though we've been consuming them since the beginning of humanity, and that somehow this new product was more digestible. Okay, well, this is a book that was written by the former vice president of the American Heart Association, and I just could not believe my luck when I came across this. Before Procter & Gamble stepped in, it's really clear that the American Heart Association is struggling as an organization that doesn't have much power or many funds. So this is a chapter, starts from 1946. It starts, there is little doubt that the cardiologists, the scientists, and local groups involved with the American Heart Association were extremely frustrated. Their inability to deal with disease, but also their inability to get anybody's attention. They just literally could not be an actor on the national stage. And then not long after that comes this event where Procter & Gamble steps in and really gives them the funds that they need to become a national organization. At a luncheon on April 14th, 1948, at the Stevens Hotel in Chicago, the president of the AHA was presented a check by representatives of Procter & Gamble. Suddenly, the coffers were filled, and there were funds available for research, public health programs, blah, 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 all the stuff that dreams are made of. In the 1920s, 30s, 40s, the American Heart Association was a sleepy little organization because cardiologists were relatively rare, as heart disease was relatively rare back then. And then in 1948, in comes Procter & Gamble.
And they literally infused $1.7 million into the American Heart Association, which was this little tiny organization. $1.7 million is the equivalent of $20 million today. So the American Heart Association became a huge organization overnight.
American housewives had shifted over to seed oils because they were cheaper. Margarine was cheaper than butter. Seed oils were cheaper than any kind of animal fat for cooking. There was an economic incentive. But now there was a medical incentive.
News that the president had suffered a heart attack was flashed to the world on September 24th, 1955.
In 1955, President Eisenhower had a heart attack.
America was plagued with uncertainty.
The attention of the nation was 100% focused on President Eisenhower, and what caused heart disease? Nobody knew. The public was desperate for answers. Here was the #1 killer of the nation, felling men in the prime of life, and really, people had no idea about how to protect themselves. So into this vacuum steps Ansel Keys.
I, Dr. Ansel Keys, am a physiologist. My specialty is diet and health.
Ansel Keys believed that saturated fat and cholesterol caused heart disease because they would raise your blood cholesterol, and like hot oil down a cold stovepipe would gradually shrink your arteries until you had a heart attack. That was called the diet heart hypothesis. Ansel Keys got onto the Nutrition Committee of the American Heart Association in 1960, and in 1961, 1 year later, even though there was no additional new science, the American Heart Association endorsed his view and adopted Ansel Keys's hypothesis.
From the beginning of the production, sale, distribution of vegetable oils, it was never about health. They promoted vegetable oils as healthy, but it was never about health. It was always about profit.
In fact, at the time, there was hardly any evidence for Ansel Keys's idea that saturated fat and cholesterol cause heart disease. There was a large study called the 7-country study on nearly 13,000 men.
I am presently engaged in a major experiment involving the health and eating habits of some 10,000 individuals scattered throughout the world.
Looking at their diets and following them over time to see who died of heart attacks or any other cause of death. What were some of the problems with that study? He went to countries like Yugoslavia, Greece, Italy, that had been ravaged by World War II when he visited them.
We are collecting data on all types, from African tribesmen to American businessmen.
And he avoided countries like Switzerland, France, Germany, sausage eaters, omelet eaters, high saturated fat diets, who also had really low rates of heart disease. He cherry-picked his countries to get the desired results that he wanted.
I think there were so many things that all came together at the right times to create an atmosphere of belief in this hypothesis that animal fats and saturated animal fat were the enemy.
Seed oils do lower your cholesterol on your total and your LDL cholesterol. In large clinical trials, the most rigorous kind of evidence on 76,000 people, lowering your LDL cholesterol by consuming seed oils has never been shown to have any benefit for death from heart disease or death from any cause.
What we have in Western medicine is this propensity to look at all of the data together without looking at carefully how good every individual study is. When there are multiple studies on a topic and the results of those studies are conflicting, what we tend to do in Western medicine is zoom out when we should be zooming in to look at the quality of every individual study.
Just to give you a sense of how early warning signs on seed oils were ignored, in 1956, there was a trial on corn oil by somebody named G.A. Rose. They fed 19 teaspoons of corn oil to subjects, and they followed them for 3 years compared to a control group. At the end of 2 years, they stopped the experiment early because people having corn oil were dying at such higher rates. At the end of the experiment, the researchers wrote, "We have to recognize that clinical trials are not always to the benefit of the patients, and we cannot recommend vegetable oils to fight heart disease, and they are possibly harmful." There should have been no experiments since then. There should have been game over for seed oils. In the early 1980s, when clinical trials, again, high-level evidence began to show that feeding people seed oils caused cancer, especially colon cancer. This was in a dozen clinical trials, this result came out. The National Institutes of Health had a series of very high-level meetings, including the top scientists of the day, trying to explain why were people dying from cancer from seed oil diets. I mean, they had a number of explanations, but nobody was satisfied by them. And ultimately they decided, well, reducing cholesterol was just so important that they would just ignore the cancer results. And then there were other results in conferences that came out, animal experiments showing cirrhosis of the liver from seed oils. There were results about toxic oxidation products. What concerns me most is that this science is not unknown. It has just been silenced.
So what we need is a new study. We need new studies. Who will fund this? Why would anyone fund this? The majority of funding for medical studies comes from private industry, namely pharmaceutical companies. No pharmaceutical company will ever fund a study looking at saturated fat versus seed oils today. So we're kind of stuck looking at antiquated data and doing the best we can. I believe very strongly that if we look at this data, even though it's poorly done carefully, it still, to me, strongly suggests that seed oils are very problematic for human health.
So I'm frustrated by our food supply because it's making us sick and people are not aware of it. They're completely unaware that the food choices they make today can cause their illness and even their death tomorrow.
There exist on the earth populations of humans that do not suffer the same decline in health that we are as westernized humans. And that discordance, that striking difference, I think is something that we should not ignore. That there are thousands of humans who do not suffer chronic illness in general at all. That begs a very, very profound question. What are they doing differently than us?
Ancestral diets are made of whole, natural foods. Foods that don't come with labels, don't come with ingredient labels. They're not boxed, packaged, canned. They're foods that you have to make yourself. If you think about the Maasai warriors of Kenya and Tanzania, they were studied by George Mann back in 1972. Their diet is milk, meat, and blood, and it's 66% animal fat. It's the highest animal fat diet in the world. That's 40 to 46% saturated animal fat, and yet virtually no heart disease. Another example might be the Teicholz of the South Pacific. Their diet, extremely different. It's made up of coconut, fish, starchy tubers, and fruit. Their diet was 50% saturated fat. But did they have heart disease? No, they had absolutely none. They had no heart disease, they had no diabetes, they had no obesity. The natural level of omega-6 linoleic acid in the body fat of people on an ancestral diet is about 2.8%. But Americans already had omega-6 LA in their body fat of 9.1% by 1959, and that increased to 21.5% by 2008. But you can see that there's all kinds of diets around the world with all sorts of different macronutrient ratios, the ratios of proteins, fats to carbs, and it makes no difference what those are for the most part, as long as your diet is made up of ancestral ingredients. You can be all over the board with those ratios and still be healthy.
How can we be getting hundreds and hundreds of calories a day from seed oils? This is how. Things like bread that we don't even expect to have seed oils. But this bread has over 25 ingredients and seed oils. This includes soybean oil in this bread, something we wouldn't expect to be in a bread. Here's a chip. You're in the sun, you're eating chips. This is a healthy chip. It's a whole grain chip. It's heart healthy on the label. The second ingredient on the label is sunflower oil or canola oil. But there's evidence from many studies to suggest that ultra-processed foods like this don't satiate us. They don't quell our hunger in the same way that unprocessed animal and plant foods might, an apple, a banana. Whereas this type of food we know is going to cause us to be hungrier sooner and to eat more food throughout the day. There's actually studies in humans suggesting that when we give humans linoleic acid-rich oils like seed oils, we have higher levels of hunger hormones. This looks like a very healthy food. It's a dressing, it's a ranch dressing, right? It's gonna go on my healthy salad. But again, this is an ultra-processed food. We wouldn't expect it to be, but it's an ultra-processed food. The first ingredient on this label is not water, it's soybean or canola oil. The majority of what is in this container is a seed oil. So another thing that we might think of as a healthier option is a plant-based milk. This oat milk contains canola oil. On the label here it says low erucic acid rapeseed oil. I'm not sure if Oatly is trying to disguise the fact that it contains a seed oil, but they say low erucic acid rapeseed oil. So we have here an ultra-processed food. We have a food that your grandmother would never recognize. It starts with oats and water, to which they add seed oils, and they add multiple synthetic vitamins so that the nutrition label actually looks good. Because if the nutrition label doesn't have any nutrients, why would anyone drink this plant milk? So I think that reading labels is enlightening for us. And even foods that we would think of as simple often contain hidden ingredients, contain far more ingredients than we expect, and often contain seed oils.
The ideal diet, in my view, is one that is rich in natural animal foods. So we're talking fish, seafood, eggs, dairy, cheese, meat. Any of those foods contain all the nutrients, the vitamins and minerals in a form that are the most easily digestible.
Today, we should think of ourselves as hunters and gatherers, and we should be careful about where we hunt. And we should educate ourselves by reading labels and understanding that not everything we pick up in a grocery store, even if it claims to be a healthy grocery store, is going to support health in us as humans.
3 steps you can take to improve your diet right away. First of all, try to avoid those central aisles of the supermarket with the packages and all that processed or ultra-processed food.
We simply shop around the outside of the grocery store and we focus on unprocessed animal foods. We will do better. We will do very good as humans. If we venture into the dangerous hunting grounds and we go to the center of the grocery store, we will inevitably fill our carts with ultra-processed foods, sometimes without knowing it. Foods like salad dressings or cookies or cakes or crackers or plant milks that are full of seed oils and that are full of other ingredients that are probably contributing to ill human health.
Second step, get rid of seed oils in your home. Canola oil, Wesson oil, safflower, sunflower, just throw those out and replace them with butter, ghee, coconut oil is a good one. Try that out.
You need to use an oil. I would stick with coconut oil, it's 2% omega-6 LA, or olive oil. And you need to be careful with olive oil because so much of it, around 79% of it in the United States, is not good quality and or is adulterated with cheap other types of oils like soybean oil and canola oil.
If people want to include olive or avocado oil in their diet, if you can find an organic, single-source, cold-pressed, in an opaque glass container, you might use that in a healthful way on a salad, but I would not heat those oils. The best thing for us is to use the animal fats as much as we can. And I believe that saturated fat-rich oils are the healthiest oils for humans. But saturated fat has been vilified. But I think if we look at the research carefully, saturated fat is not harmful for humans and actually has many healthful roles in the human body. So do not fear saturated fat for humans.
Number 3, when you go out, probably don't order fried food, I'm afraid to say. It's all fried in soybean oil, and that is a lot of oxidation products that you are then getting in your food and absorbing in your body. So those 3 things, not so hard actually, will vastly reduce the amount of seed oils in your diet.
As an athlete, I want to be thriving in my sport, and so I focus on my diet. But I'm like, why wouldn't you want to be thriving in life even if you're not a professional athlete? Like, let's all thrive. This isn't just only for athletes, this is for everyone. And I think that's so important to understand, that this can literally change the trajectory of your future. So on top of removing seed oils, I kind of started eating quite a bit more animal-based and just getting a lot of protein and good fresh carbs and lots of fruit. And like overall, my energy is just amazing throughout the day, and I sleep really well. And so I feel like this supports me so much to be a better mom, to be a better, functioning human in society. And I'm just so grateful that I figured that out. And with my children too, I see it in them. They're really stable. They are just thriving. And I want that for other moms. I want that for other families. My encouragement, if you're wanting to make these shifts in your health and life, is just taking the baby steps, because if you try to jump a mile, it just feels really hard. And so let's just put one foot in front of the other and truck along. And after a while, your energy and stamina will grow and build, and then all of a sudden you will be running a mile and it will feel easy. And so just knowing that it's normal that it might feel kind of challenging and tricky at first, but over time, then you don't even think about it, and you find your foods that give you the energy you want to have and give you the health you need. I don't want food to be a war. I don't want it to be a drag. I want it to be something enjoyable and something that gives me life and supports me to have fun and love life.
Certainly there's an argument that the healthiest foods, the organic foods, they do cost a little bit more. There's no question. That little bit of investment that you make in your food choices now and your food expense now, which is a little bit higher, could save you 10 times, 100 times or more in the long run, because you will prevent all of these diseases. You will prevent your own disability. You will prevent your own premature death. What is that worth to you and to your family? Maybe to your children, your grandchildren. Do we owe that to ourselves and to our families? I think so. It's an investment in yourself and in your family.
I think the one hopeful thing I can say to people, because the nutrition information landscape out there is so maddeningly confusing, you at least can experiment on your own body. And you are your own N=1 experiment. Try it out. Try for 3 weeks eliminating seed oils and see how you feel. Do your aches and pains go away? They do for a lot of people. Does the skin condition start to improve? It does for a lot of people. See if it works for you.
Our food supply is frustrating because it's nutrient deficient and it's toxic. And people need to understand this. Once they do, they can start making informed choices, because there are good foods and there are regeneratively raised foods from farmers and ranchers who truly care and want to provide great food to us.
If we just return to where we've come from and we think about what makes sense, if we use our intuition, it becomes clear that including large amounts of ultra-processed foods, ingredients that we would never have been exposed to, seed oils, which are a recent addition to the human diet, which are refined, bleached, deodorized, oxidized, and clearly are harmful and difficult for the human body to deal with, including lots of these things in our diet, despite what we may be told, is probably not a good idea.
The people of the year 1900, for example, they didn't know anything about nutrition. They'd never heard of vitamins. Vitamins hadn't even been theorized yet. Weren't concerned with low carb or low fat or keto or being a vegan or any of this for the most part. They just ate what was in the food supply. Yet they were lean, they were fit, they were healthy, they had no heart disease, they had basically no chronic disease, right? But they were just eating what was in the food supply. It was simple. Today, if you just eat what's in the food supply, you will get sick. That's a standard American diet. We know that's the one diet that absolutely will not work for anyone.
We're being told that seed oils are good for health and saturated fats are bad for health, when the opposite is true. I feel like truth is a form of justice, and when people aren't getting the truth, they're being ill-served, and it's not just that they're being lied to, it's that their health is suffering. They're losing their family, relatives, their kids are obese. I mean, it is information that is truly damaging our nation at every level.
I'll tell you this, when you remove vegetable oils, your risk of heart attack and stroke go down that day. That day.